The stranger placed one muddy glove beside Amos Bell's finest plate and said, "Before supper ends, someone in this house will lie to me." At the kitchen door, Ruth Bell stopped breathing. She wore a brown feed sack dress with a crooked hem. Lye had bleached one sleeve. A burn mark spread across the pocket where a lantern had caught it last winter. Her father had ordered her to look plain. He had not needed to ask twice. Outside, November wind scraped dry cottonwood leaves across the Red Creek yard. Beyond the windows, the Wyoming Valley lay under a hard, silver sky. Every fence, well, and grazing trail seemed frozen in place. Yet the guest watched the room as if something underneath it was moving. Keep your eyes on his muddy glove. Before this night was over, Ruth would learn where that mud came from. Amos pushed back his chair. His smile showed too many teeth. "Mr. Cole, my daughters, Cora and June." The younger women stepped forward in blue silk and ivory lace. Cora lowered her lashes. June held out a hand that had never lifted a water bucket. Ruth remained beside the stove with a pot of rabbit stew against her hip. Amos did not introduce her. The stranger noticed. He looked about 38, with sun-browned skin and black hair touched by rain. His gray coat was well cut, but dust covered the shoulders. A thin scar crossed his left thumb. Nothing about him matched the wealthy buyer Amos had spent all week preparing to impress. "Your rider came alone?" Amos asked. "I came alone. Road from Cheyenne is rough." "I did not come from Cheyenne." The spoon in Amos's hand struck the bowl. Ruth carried the stew forward. As she leaned near the guest, she smelled wet earth on his coat. Red Creek had seen no rain for 6 weeks. He glanced at her ruined sleeve. "Barn fire?" Her father answered for her. "Kitchen carelessness." Ruth set down the pot. Under the table, her fingers closed until one nail split the skin of her palm. The mark had come while she dragged a sleeping ranch hand from a burning stall. Amos knew that. So did both sisters. No one spoke. Wind pressed cold fingers against the loose window panes. Mr. Cole turned the muddy glove once with 2 fingers. "Carelessness leaves different marks," he said. Amos poured whiskey. The guest did not touch his glass. 2 hours earlier, Ruth had found him near the north well, kneeling beside a broken pump. She had taken him for a hired surveyor. His horse stood nearby, breathing hard, its fetlocks dark with clay. He had asked who controlled the water gates above Miller's Cut. "My father," Ruth had said. "Does he open them fairly?" She had studied his boots. Red mud filled the seams. There was only one patch of red clay in the valley. It lay beyond Blacktooth Ridge, where a spring fed 6 ranches before reaching Bell Land. "You crossed the upper spring," she had said. His eyes had lifted then. "Most people here tell me the ridge is impassable. Most people want strangers away from that spring." Now he sat at her father's table, carrying proof that he had seen it. Hold close to Ruth here. The worst dress in the room was hiding the only person who understood what that mud could expose. Amos began talking about cattle numbers. He claimed 800 head. Ruth counted 612 at fall branding. He praised the north grass. Half of it had died under frost. Then he spoke of water. "Red Creek never runs dry," Amos said. The guest looked toward Ruth. She felt heat climb beneath her collar. The stove popped behind her, sending one bright coal against the iron grate. "Never?" he asked. Amos lifted his glass. "Not in my lifetime." Mr. Cole reached inside his coat and laid a folded map across the white tablecloth. 6 ranches were marked in black ink. Across each one ran the same blue line. At Bellland, the line ended behind a square Ruth knew well, her father's new diversion gate.
Cora's smile vanished. June lowered her fork. Amos stared at the map, then at Ruth, as if she had drawn it. "Who are you?" he asked. The guest stood. Rain began ticking against the western window, though the yard remained dry. "Nathaniel Vale," he said. "I own the spring, the creek, and every leased acre from Blacktooth Ridge to Red Creek." Thunder rolled beyond the hills. Then someone pounded 3 times on the front door. Ruth opened it. A ranch boy fell across the threshold, red mud on his knees and blood running from his hair. "The upper dam is gone," he gasped. "Water's coming down." The floor moved before anyone reached the yard. Dishes rattled inside the cupboard. A low grinding sound came through the ground, deep enough to shake dust from the rafters. Nathaniel caught the ranch boy under both arms. "How long ago?" he asked. "Maybe 10 minutes. Mr. Miller sent me." Ruth knelt and pressed her apron against the cut above the boy's ear. "Was the whole dam gone?" The boy swallowed twice. "Middle broke first, then the north wall folded." Ruth looked at the map. Water from the upper spring would race through Miller's cut. From there it would split at Crow Fork. One branch ran toward the Bell pasture. The other dropped straight toward Red Creek, where 30 families slept below the road. "We have less than an hour," she said. Amos grabbed her wrist. "You know nothing about that dam." Her skin whitened beneath his fingers. "I know you raised it in May." Cora turned from the window. "Father said the county built it." Amos released Ruth. Nathaniel's voice stayed level. "The county refused the permit." The rain struck harder. It came slanting from the west, silver in the lamplight. Ruth pointed to Crow Fork. "There is an old spill gate here. Open it, and the water turns south into our winter pasture." "That pasture holds every steer we own," Amos said. "Then move them." "In darkness?" Ruth untied her apron. "Open their fences. Cattle will climb from water if men do not crowd them." Nathaniel folded the map and placed it in her hand. "You lead." Amos stepped between them. "This is my ranch." Another tremor passed under the house. From far up the valley came a sound like wagons crossing broken boards. It did not stop. Ruth pulled on her coat over the brown dress. "Cora, ring the chapel bell. June, wake every house below the road. Take the wagon. Keep to high ground." Her sisters stared at her. Then June removed her ivory shoes and threw them beneath the table. "Come on, Cora." They ran into the rain. Amos watched the open door swing against its frame. His lower lip moved, but no order came. Ruth and Nathaniel reached the stable. Her mare, Penny, kicked the stall wall as the ground shook again. Nathaniel saddled his black horse without wasting a motion. Remember the burn Amos called carelessness. The same scarred sleeve now covered the arm, reaching into a night filled with water. They rode north. Rain cut their faces. Mud pulled at the horses' legs. Along the lower road, lanterns appeared one by one as June's wagon passed the cabins. Then the chapel bell began. 1 strike. 2. Again and again, Cora dragged the rope. At the Bell pasture, Ruth opened the main fence. Hundreds of cattle pressed together beyond it, white breath pouring from their noses. She rode past the lead steer and slapped her wet skirt against Penny's flank. "Up, boy! Take them up!" The steer turned toward the ridge. The herd followed. Nathaniel pulled beside her.
Crow Fork is 3 miles. 2 if we cross Miller's Orchard. That bridge will not hold. We will not use the bridge." They entered the orchard as the first brown water burst between the trees. Penny plunged belly deep. Ruth leaned forward, gripping the mane. Apples rolled through the flood like dark stones. Nathaniel's horse lost its footing.
He dropped sideways, one boot trapped in the stirrup. Ruth turned Penny across the current. She caught his coat and cut the leather strap with the small knife from her pocket. He surfaced beside her, coughing muddy water. Together they climbed the far bank. Nathaniel looked at her burned pocket. "Kitchen carelessness?" "Something like that." The spill gate stood ahead between 2 rock walls. A rusted wheel controlled the wooden barrier. Ruth seized it. The wheel would not move. Nathaniel wrapped both hands over hers. Metal scraped. Their boots slid backward through the mud. The wheel turned half an inch. Something struck the gate from upstream. The wooden barrier jumped in its stone slots. A thin jet of water shot through the seam and hit Ruth across the knees. Nathaniel pulled at the wheel again. "Once more." Ruth shifted her boots against a buried root. Cold water filled both shoes. Her split palm opened against rusted iron, leaving a red smear beneath her grip. From the road above came hoofbeats. Penny screamed and backed hard toward the rocks. A rifle fired. Stone broke beside Nathaniel's head. Amos sat on horseback above them, rain running from his hat. Smoke curled from the barrel in his hands. "Step away from that gate," he said. Behind him, the rising flood carried half of Miller's barn into the narrow cut. Ruth placed both hands on the wheel. Her father raised the rifle again. Nathaniel moved between Ruth and the rifle. "If you fire," he said, "the water still comes." Amos's horse stamped along the ridge. The barrel shook once, then steadied against Nathaniel's chest. "That pasture is all I have." Ruth kept her hands on the wheel. "There are children below Crow Fork." "Her father should have built higher." The words barely left Amos before Ruth drove her shoulder into the iron spokes. The wheel turned. Amos fired. Nathaniel twisted as the bullet tore through his coat. He dropped to one knee, clutching his upper arm. Ruth shoved again. The gate lifted 6 inches. Water blasted through, striking her legs and pinning her against the wheel. Amos threw down the rifle and slid from his saddle. "Stop, Ruth! You will break the ranch!" She looked up at him through the rain. "You broke the dam!" His mouth opened. No sound followed. Another wall of water struck the gate. The old timbers bowed toward them. Nathaniel rose, one sleeve turning dark. "Together," he said. They pulled. Rust broke loose in orange sheets. The wheel spun through their hands, lifting the barrier foot by foot. The flood changed direction. It poured through the south channel and spread across the Bell pasture. Fence posts snapped. Haystacks rolled apart. A black wave swept toward the herd climbing the ridge. Most cattle reached the rocks. 3 vanished beneath the brown water. Ruth's dress caught on an exposed gear. The cloth tightened around her waist. Her boots left the ground as the turning wheel dragged her toward the open channel. Nathaniel reached for her, but his wounded arm folded. Amos lunged from the bank. He seized the burned sleeve and pulled. The weak cloth ripped from shoulder to cuff. Ruth fell backward against him as the rest of the dress tore free from the gear. The brown piece spun once above the flood and disappeared. For several seconds, Amos held his daughter against his chest. His chin touched her wet hair. His hands trembled against the ruined cloth. Then the spill gate struck its highest stop. Down in Red Creek, the chapel bell kept ringing. The water divided around the town.
By dawn, every cabin still stood. Smoke from stoves rose through the rain. Families gathered on the chapel steps, wrapped in quilts. Mothers counted children. Old Mr. Miller stood ankle-deep in mud, holding the ranch boy who had carried the warning. No one cheered. They listened to the South Channel tear across Bell land.
Ruth watched cattle gather along the ridge. Penny stood among them, reins dragging, safe. Nathaniel came beside her. Blood ran from his cuff and fell in slow drops. "You knew the pasture would be lost," he said. "I knew the town was lower." He looked toward the houses. "That answer will cost your father everything." Ruth tore her skirt for a bandage. Men found Ruth beside the gate, wrapping Nathaniel's arm with a strip cut from her skirt. Amos sat several feet away, staring at the empty south pasture. Cora and June arrived in the wagon. Their dresses were soaked, their bare feet coated with mud. June climbed down and placed Amos's account book before Nathaniel. "We found this in Father's desk." Inside were payments from ranchers for water that Amos had taken through the illegal dam. Some had sold horses to pay him. Amos did not reach for the book. Nathaniel closed it. "Your lease ends today." Amos nodded once. Ruth tied the bandage tighter. "Where will he go?" Nathaniel studied her face. "That depends on the valley's new water keeper." She stopped tying. He handed her the folded map. "Every ranch needs fair gates. I need someone who reads ground better than paper. The position comes with the Bell house, wages, and full say over the creek." Ruth looked toward Amos. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat. He removed it and lowered his head. "Take it," he said. She unfolded the map across her torn brown dress. "First, the upper dam comes down." Nathaniel's mouth lifted at one corner. "At first light tomorrow." "Today." Before noon, hammers rang across Blacktooth Ridge. Ruth stood above the broken dam wearing a borrowed coat over her patched dress. Cora hauled stones. June drove the supply wagon. Amos worked below them, clearing the blocked spring with a shovel. Nathaniel rode up with his arm bound and one muddy glove tucked beneath his belt. He held out the other glove to Ruth. "The valley is waiting." She pulled it over her cut palm. Dark clouds gathered above the ridge. Ruth raised her hammer. The first stone of Amos Bell's dam split beneath her blow, and clear water rushed through the crack. If Ruth's ride kept you watching, subscribe and join the next frontier story.